the wise king. Once there ruled in the distant city of Virani a king who was both mighty and wise, and he was feared for his might and loved for his wisdom. Now, in the heart of that city was a well, whose water was cool and crystalline, from which all the inhabitants drank, even the king and his courtiers. For there was no other well. And one night when all were asleep, a witch entered the city and poured 7 drops of strange liquids into the well and said, "From this hour he who drinks this water shall become mad." Next morning all the inhabitants, save the king and his lord chamberlain, drank from the well and became mad, just as the witch had foretold. And during that day, the people in the narrow streets and in the marketplaces did not but whisper to one another, "The king is mad. Our king and his lord chamberlain have lost their reason. Surely we cannot be ruled by a mad king. We must dethrone him." That evening, the king ordered a golden goblet to be filled from the well. And when it was brought to him, he drank deeply and gave it to his lord chamberlain to drink. And there was a great rejoicing in that distant city of Virani, because its king and its lord chamberlain had regained their reason. This was a poem called The Wise King. And me and Elliot will discuss this poem shortly, but first of all, welcome Elliott Hulse to Aion Podcast and Elliott's cat. Welcome,
Yoni.
brother. Yoni. Elliot,
hmm
how do you relate this poem to today's era, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I saw myself in the story, of course, as the king. I think that's where many of us would place ourselves. And the first thought that came to me was an experience that I've had these most recent years where almost out of nowhere, I became addicted, I guess you could say, to smoking weed. And prior to that, I had been a superhero to so many young men. Strong, strong man, wise man. They come to me for videos, for answers, for guidance, for support, for how to be strong, how to build muscle, how to be a tough guy, how to navigate life as an entrepreneur with women. I mean, I'm the king with all the answers. Yo, Elliott. But I knew even then that I knew there was a time that I was going to be humbled. I knew that I needed a humbling because I almost was too perfect. I'm good looking and charismatic. I got it all going on. But at the same time, I recognized that that was also my biggest sin, was the biggest problem. The big problem was that I had too much blessings, too much goodness in my life. I mean, it goes on and on. You know, the mere fact that I even have a father, I realize that a big part of what I represent in this world to the young men that seek me out is father, as a father figure. I have a father. I have a strong father. So the blessings upon blessings upon blessings that have come down in me and through me, I know caused pride in me.
Mhm.
And that was my biggest downfall, pride. And so I even before I started smoking weed, I recognized that at some point I'm going to have to get chopped down. I'm going to have to come down. And either I'm going to take myself down, someone else is going to take me down, or God's going to take me down. And in a way, it was a combination of all three. And so I drank the water that allowed me to understand why so many men are addicted to pornography. They're addicted to masturbation. They're addicted to uh, promiscuity, in and out with women, addicted to video games, addicted to food, where they're obese. All the things that seem to weaken men's resolve, make them soft. I really couldn't relate to. I I'd never been addicted to pornography. I married my high school, never was into video games. I never had any of the real problems that the men that were coming to me faced. And I knew that if I was ever going to truly minister to the souls of men the way that I've been called to, I had to dip my chalice into that well. I needed to feel what it feels like to be weak. And so these past 5 years, I say, I started smoking weed, but that was just one piece of it. I tore both biceps. I tore my Achilles tendon. I had a hernia repair. I fell on my head. I'm pretty sure if you ask some people, I descended into psychosis. I went crazy. I quit making YouTube videos. So it's more than just the weed, but that was the part that was the linchpin that kept me hooked. But it was all these things that allowed me to then be where I am today, where now I'm back down to earth like the king. All the people, they were suffering, but they thought they were grounded. They thought they were where they were supposed to be. And the king realized that, boy, if I'm going to ever get my people to see eye to eye with me again, if I could ever lead them the way I'm supposed to lead them, well, then I got to go down there with them too and drink from that well. So it was a beautiful story. Yeah, and I can absolutely relate to it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story.
Mm-hmm.
You said very many things that were very interesting to me. Like, did you notice that they said the 7 drops of strange liquid? Like the 7 deadly sins, perhaps?
Yeah, good
Like,
observation.
like pride, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you had a very interesting angle that you came from here, that you were like on top, but you had to descend into the ashes, let's say, uh, to understand the people of Verani who had drinking from the poison water with the 7 deadly drops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, and I can relate very much to what you're saying too. And I think all men we go through that wounding in one way or another. We are
Mm-hmm.
kids and we know instinctively in some way or dream about the day we will grow up and become kings.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is a wounding, like in the story of the Lion King, where Simba is this young lion who wants to grow up and be a king, but he's quite grandiose and arrogant and ignorant and obviously not ready to be a king. And he receives the wound and he flees to basically a Neverland, a king of the Lost Boys, with Simba and Pumbaa, who is basically postmodernists and nihilists, like
Mm-hmm.
nothing means anything, and etc.
Yeah.
but then through that process of going down into the ashes, he is reborn, and that wounding makes him able to return to Pride Rock and become king. So it's like the wounding is a necessary process to to come back and uh, embody the mature king. Let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah. So the conclusion might be: don't be afraid to go into the ashes.
No, it's essential. You got
Yeah,
to go through
essential.
that tunnel.
Darkness, despair, and horribleness.
hmm And I sense this. I sense this long, long ago before I even recognized and learned that it's an archetype. Now
Yeah.
we see that it's a pattern, but I didn't know this was a pattern. I wasn't aware of it, but I remember before I even became King Elliott on YouTube, I remember working my way to the top. I remember struggling and striving, climbing the mountain. And I knew with the amount of effort I was giving that there was going to have to be a time where I go down. And it's funny because this was back in 2004, maybe. And by 2000, and in 2004, what I was saying to myself and clients, I was working at a gym and I'd work from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. I worked all day. And I would just say to myself, one day I'm going to when I retire, this is what I said. When I retire, I'm going to smoke weed and do yoga. That's what I told myself I was going to do. I had no idea that it would be 10 years later. I thought I'd be an old man when I finally hang it up and I say, now, because I didn't grow up smoking weed. It wasn't something that I was into ever. I maybe tried it when I was in middle school and then that was it. But because I was working so hard and because I knew that at some point this had to balance itself out, I said to myself, I prophesied. I said, at some point, I'm going to retire and I'm just going to smoke weed and do yoga. Well, it was 10 years later, but it's good. I'm happy it happened early. It's because I'm 40 now. So I get to have the rebirth. So I had a little retirement between age 36 and 40. And now I'm getting started all over again.
The rebirth,
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
the descent that made it possible for you to emerge later as a king. To have.
There's a really good book by Alison Armstrong. Uh, I can't remember the name of the book, but if you look it up, it's a book about a woman who wanted to understand men better. And she was a psychologist. So she studied all these patterns and all these ideas. And she says that there are stages. And so when a boy is young, she called him a page. He's like a little guy who like chases the knights around with holding their horse and like dreaming of being a knight one day. When you're up until about age 12, you're a page. Then when you become a teenager and testosterone starts coming up, you become a knight. So now all your energy is up and you got all this vitality and adventure and you're out there, your sexual energy starts rising. So you're recognizing and you become attractive to the opposite sex. You're playing sports and you're banging heads and you're being a beast. And then there's a second stage of the night where she calls the late night. So, the early night when you're a teenager, but then the late night, later night, second stage night is when you're doing the same sort of thing as a knight, but you're out there in the world, in your business and your career and you're doing all these nightly things, but now you're doing it out there in the world. But you would imagine that you go from page to knight to king, but that's not the way it goes. And this is what she discovered. She says, you never go from becoming a knight or a middle knight to a king. She says there's always an in-between phase, and she called it the tunnel. And she says, in order for a man to go from knight to king, he literally has to go down.
Down
And
into the
there's a
ashes.
whole lot of digestion that needs to happen, a whole lot of processing that needs to happen before he can actually become a king. And so it makes perfect sense. I realize that,
Yeah.
being a knight, being out there crushing it, but to really be a king means that you need catabasis. You got to go down and you got to digest and then be born again.
It's a very central archetypal theme, the descent into hell.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, and the knight sounds like the hero archetype in a sense
Hmm.
that it is fueled with some somewhat grandiosity and uh, bravery to
Hmm.
draw a sword and go out into the world and conquer it, basically.
Hmm.
And the hero always has to die for the warrior to be born.
Hmm.
So, but that is not to discourage the hero
Hmm.
to pathologize his grandiosity. It seems like it is quite necessary uh, for him to have that grandiosity, to be able to have the courage to face the impossible, to leave home and to throw himself out there in a quite maybe naive way, but at least he's out there and
Hmm.
uh, grabs the world by the balls, basically.
Hmm.
But then
Yeah.
he will
Yeah.
be
Go back and you got to go hard. You got to use
yeah,
that
gotta go hard.
energy when you got the
Yes,
energy too. There's
yes,
another concept that, in fact, it's been revisiting me over and over again. But that young men shouldn't be exposed to too many high spiritual ideas
too early.
too early, because and
I
we living
agree.
in an age where all the spiritual ideas are being poured out to young men, and they're losing themselves
Yeah, they trapped
because
here.
they're hmm?
They get trapped in the mind.
They get trapped in the mind. They get
Yeah,
trapped in things that are really more appropriate for the later stage. Later on, right now, you're full of piss and vinegar. Right now,
yeah,
you're full of fire and testosterone. You don't need
yeah.
to think too much. You don't need to be too spiritual. Don't go on your ayahuasca trip just yet. Get out there and grab your sword and conquer something, kill something, do
Yes,
something. Then, when you beat yourself to death and when you're reaching middle age and the energy's not there, but the wisdom grows, now the spiritual ideas make much more sense. And what you once had, which was energy, now is at least in my case, is transplanted by time. I have time now. I didn't have time then because I had a family to raise, I had bills to pay. I still do, but I created all that momentum
mm.
so that now I can sit and pray for 3 hours a day if I want.
Because you have time.
Yeah, I go to mass every morning. I sit and I meditate and I pray, and maybe I'll spend a whole day just reading books. But it's because I have the time now, because I earlier on I was killing it with my sword. I was making 5 YouTube videos a day, running my gym, putting on events. I was doing all these things. So now I have the momentum. Now I have the platform. Now I can sit back and be spiritual. I can be the king.
Yeah,
Where the king is, it's about the throne, right? Where the warrior is about the sword, the king is about the throne. And now I could sit on the throne.
do you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hmm.
Yeah, good. It seems like in all areas of life, basically, we are so end goal oriented that we want to skip the process of getting to that, let's call it end state, even though nothing is ever an end state. This shit never ends,
Yeah.
basically. But the maturation of the boyhood archetypes needs to have their place before they can go into the mature archetypes, like the king, the magician, the warrior, and the lover. And in my case, I started reading spiritual teachings from like the age of 10, and it fucked me up. It was, I was like this 11-year-old kid who read Eckhart Tolle, The Power and Now, and in my home I was like, it's your pain body speaking right now. You need, you know, ridiculous. And
Uh-huh.
it made me so ungrounded, and it
Mm-hmm.
trapped me into in my mind, and I basically threw away my sword
Mm-hmm.
because I learned to somewhat neglect all these, let's call it primal drives, as a
Mm-hmm.
lower, consciousness or whatever, and I need to ascend them not by integrating but by stepping over them, skipping them, and then they come back to bite you in the ass.
Oh yeah.
You can't skip any steps
Mm-hmm.
in the archetypal integration. It will it will destroy you.
Yep, we got to pay every penny.
Yeah. So I resonate very much with what you are saying with the that you don't should not take up the pursuit too early.
Yeah, and it's tough because you guys, at the age of 10, I'm sure you had the internet.
Yeah.
So you're
That was,
exposed. And the internet's a double-edged sword because yes, there is access, but there's unrestrained, uncontrolled, ungrounded access, too much access
yeah.
at too quickly,
Yes.
because we're talking about restraining the access when you're young. But I'm finding now, as I'm gaining in age and wisdom, that I want less access. I don't want more information. I want less
Good.
books. I want less ideas. I want less conversations. The whole idea of needing to know, there was a time when, and my wife would tell you, I would just lament, I want to know everything. I want to know. These days, I don't want to know anything, even if it's quote unquote true, right? Like uh, the evil things that the oligarch and leaders of our world are imposing upon us, and all these ideas that come out. I'm not sure I need to know.
Yeah.
What good
Uh,
is that going to do for me? I, in fact, I just rather not know. Oh, they're polluting the air with the chemtrails and they're putting fluoride in the water and the 5G network. I'm like, you know what? Just don't tell me.
yeah.
I don't want to know.
It is kind of too much information that it kind of blows the fuse. You get stressed out, and I feel like I get my energy, rises, and I get trapped into my head. And
Yeah, it destroys us.
yeah,
Too many options, too many choices, too many opportunities. Less.
yeah,
Simple. I want to be simple. It's hard to be simple in this
yeah.
world.
It is very hard. Just as you are saying, we have so many options in everything, and I think it, just like you're saying, it is a double-edged sword. It obviously have a lot of benefits to just go to the internet and search for whatever information you want to acquire, but the problem is, as you were saying, too much makes one ungrounded.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if one study philosophy very, very hard, it is very easy to fall down in a postmodern hell, where
Mm-hmm.
you come to the conclusion like there are so many ways to view things, and how can one be right above another?
Right.
And you try to solve the riddle with the mind. So you basically lose contact with the inner king, what actually feels uh, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that is a problem there. And I know you are very interested and have been very much engaged in the bioenergetic therapy. And I think one of the major problems today is the head and body split.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. How do you view this split in today's world.
Well, it's funny. We were just having a conversation, me and my business partner Chris, at the Strength Camp, and we work with a lot of millennials. Most of the guys that either join Strength Camp or work for us at Strength Camp, uh, they're from the millennial generation, so we have to relate to them, and we recognize, because he and I are a little bit older, we recognize there's a little bit of a difference there between us. And one of the major differences is that you guys are brilliant. Like, these guys are so smart. They have so many ideas. They can quote so many things. They have so much access to so many ideas, but it all stays up here.
Yeah.
And it
Yes.
seems like none of it can actually make its way down into the body to be accessed, to actually to be used.
Doesn't
They can,
Earth.
hmm yeah, it doesn't translate. So it's like really powerful calculators, but no machinery to utilize it. And with that, there's also a high degree of fantasy going on because of, well, social media in particular. You get access to these images, idolatry, people, and which are mostly in dream. Wow, I'm gonna have that one day, or I need to do that what he's doing, or I need to be like that guy, or how do I get there, or how do I get that, and then building castles in the sky. But while these castles are being built in the sky, they're living amongst their own filth and their own dirt. And it's like, wait a second, sweep the room that you're in right now before you start going to build a castle.
Fill your cup so much that it spills.
Do what you can do right here. A
Yeah.
lot of times they're living in the fantasy world.
Yeah.
And this was a big breakthrough. I do a King's Transformation coaching call every week. And one of the biggest breakthroughs that I just spit it out there, but the men started emailing me and they're like, wow, this was huge for me, is to do everything you can do with what you have right here, right now, before you start dreaming about the next thing. You just said it right. You got to fill up your cup. There's a great book called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, where he says that if you want more, you've got to fill up your current space. You got to fill up your current life, meaning do what you can with what you have. Do the best that you can in your current job. You want a better job? Then get to the top in your current job. You want a bigger house? Fill up and take advantage of and make beautiful your current house, rather than neglecting what you have and trying to go get something else. That's building castles in the sky.
Yeah. The I would call it the dreamer, the dreamer archetype.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the dreamer is a shadow pole to the precautious. No, the I don't quite remember, but
A lot of magician.
yeah, a lot of
There's a lot of
magician.
magician quality there,
Yeah,
where the magician is keyboard warrior is another really good example of that,
yeah,
of that type, where I got all the right words, I got all the right ideas, I got all the right education, I got all the right mindset, but I have nothing to
yeah,
do with. I can't do anything with it.
yeah. I write about this in my book, the bioenergetics and the archetypal male psyche, and the problem I think arises when the magician loses contact with the king. And I equate the magician with the ego layer in the bioenergetic modality. We have the center point in the bioenergetic modality, the self, the core, and then we have the emotional layer, and then we have the muscular layer, and then we have the ego layer. In my model, I equate the core with the king, since the king is the central archetype in the kingdom, the keeper of order and the center point. And then we have the emotional layer, which I call the lover, since the lover is the impulse and the emotion to reach out to the world, to connect and to love. And the muscular layer I connect with the warrior, which is doing, uh, as you are talking about. And the king might be more like being, you know, just be, and the warrior
Hmm.
is do. And the ego layer then is the magician. And I think the problem
Hmm.
arises if the magician loses contact with the king. They are like, they have an umbilical cord to each other at all times, which can never quite be broken, but the closest thing to break it is the psychotic break. And if they go too much apart, it is like the magician loses itself in an endless ocean of potentialities, but he doesn't do anything because they are this endless ocean of potentialities, but none feels more right than the other. And he doesn't embody anything. He might jump to different ones, like you were saying, with too many options. I'm gonna be a surfer. Oh fuck, no, I didn't like surf so much. Maybe I'm gonna be an MMA fighter. Oh no, fuck, I'm gonna be an author. You know, the integration from the layers is not quite enough. It is not enough fueling energy from the warrior to do, and that it is
Right.
not enough from the king to know what is the right thing for me in my life's purpose to do.
Yeah.
And I think it is what we were talking about earlier with the head body split.
Hmm.
Just like Lowen were talking about many years ago, especially in his book Narcissism and the
Hmm.
betrayal of the body. Uh, and he foresaw that this will grow worse. And I
Yeah.
think it is quite clear that it has in many ways. And I don't know if it is not so crazy to assume that maybe the gender dysphoria, for example, might be an collective manifestation of the mind turning on the self.
Yeah.
You know, identification with an image which is an opposite of your bodily self. Like in bioenergetic, the body is the self.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on everything that I just said?
Well, I think you've got a pretty good model there. I followed
Yeah.
you, and I think that's exactly where we're at. That all made perfect sense to me. And it's when we're in our constant thinking, doing, and feeling that we're distracted from our being.
Yeah.
And the more we could settle those other layers, the more we can sink back into the to where that umbilical cord attaches, right? To
Yeah.
the deep self. So these days, I don't want to feel anything anymore. I don't want to think anything anymore. I don't want to do anything anymore. I'm just being.
Mm.
And then from that wellspring, whatever thinking, doing, or feeling needs to be, will just be.
Yeah.
And
The
then I can
king,
just be me.
because you are so relaxed in the layers that the king's signal will have a very easy way to penetrate the layers, and it will be a natural expression of the king. You are embodying, let's say, the king, so the king can express himself through you, which actually is you.
Hmm.
uh, and that is amazing to hear.
Hmm. Calm.
Calm.
That's the way, yeah, that's the way it's Robert Moore describes it in one of his lectures. He
Mm.
says, when you've accessed the king, you're calm, just calm.
Center. Yeah.
So if we're anxious or depressed,
Yeah.
we know that we're not accessing our king very well.
Yeah, it's very true. I have a few points that I wrote down that I was very eager to discuss with you as well. Um, the first thing to start with might be: do we see a trend in the best word I find right now is trend, but are we seeing a trend where men have grown weaker over time? And what would you say are the factors for this happening? Like, as you mentioned in the King Transformation class, that from 1987 or 82, testosterone has dropped 1% every year until now. Um, so it's basically like we are dying out, like
Yeah.
real. Um, what are your thoughts about this and why this is happening?
Well, you're talking about the physiology, and there's no doubt that we're changing physiologically. And we can get into all the reasons why, some of which is within our grasp, some of which we could do a better job. You know, eat. We do have a choice about sleep, treating our bodies well, resting. Rest is probably the biggest miss that most men are struggling with. And we do have a choice about whether or not we're going to use the body the way it was designed to be used, exercise and to lift. So these are things that we can do something about. But I also believe that there may be other forces at play that are poisoning us.
Yeah.
Poisoning us in the air. I think the technology is poisoning us on a vibratory level. We're being manipulated at the level of our DNA. All of these vaccinations, I'm not going to make my opinion, but we're definitely taking way too many drugs, way too many unnecessary medications. We're getting to the point where, I bring up vaccination because a lot of times these are mandatory. How do you make a medication mandatory? That it's a little scary when you think about that. You must take this pharmaceutical. Not, hey, this is in your best interest to take. You might want to take it. You must. So if it's not being administered into our bodies through pinpricks, it's probably coming through our food, it's coming through our water. So there's a whole lot there that maybe we don't have a grasp over. But there are a lot of things that we do have a grasp over when we're talking about physiology, the physical world. But I think one layer deeper than that, that's causing, I think the root of it is spiritual. And we're really fighting a spiritual battle. And you see the fruits of the spiritual battle manifest themselves in the lack of integrity, character in all people, but men in particular. And the lack of commitment, discipline, honor, devotion, all come from and point to and revolve around, in my opinion, the breakdown of the family.
Yes.
Because these spiritual qualities get passed down from the father. They get passed down from God the Father, through the father in the home, and into the mother and children. But as the family has fractured, the media and the state has become our daddies.
Yes.
And it's hard pressed to find a home where there's a strong alpha male father with integrity that does the right thing, says the right thing, and walks in the authority of the Lord and shares that authority through his behavior with his family. Very rare these days.
Yes.
And so if we're wanting to reconstitute, we want to bring this whole thing back, I think we got to go back to the core of society, which is the family. And we've been tricked out of it in so many different regards. I mean, we've been told all kinds of noble, what do they call it? The noble savage lies about how, religion and patriarchy created the family. It's not natural. Well, I don't want to go down that route too far, but if that is the case, well, if we made it up, it was a good idea. We should go back to it. But I don't believe that's the case. I believe that marriage and family is law. It works. It's proper. It's the natural way of things. But then, and a lot of people pin me as a misogynist for saying things like this, but giving way too many rights to the woman to separate from the man. Divorce laws are out of control. You can just pick up and leave whenever you want. And this is a result of women being able to vote in politicians that allow them to do whatever they want. So there really is nobody holds them to the fire. Everybody, it's laissez-faire. Do what you want. Anybody can do whatever they want, however they want. And there is no meaning. There's no structure. There's no authority.
Anything goes.
Anything goes. You want to kill your baby in the womb? Well, go right ahead. Now it's infanticide, pure infanticide. You can basically kill your baby on its way out. And, why that into motion? These are our leaders, but who votes those leaders in? No man is going to vote for the killing of his baby. Only a woman would do that because of so-called liberation. And you don't have to, you could argue with me, but look, this is what we have. This is what has happened, and we've got people who tell their children that they're allowed to be something that they're not. We got trans kids now, which is another weird thing that I think is also a byproduct of this desire of the oligarchy to want to destroy our sexuality and to depopulate the planet, but to chemically castrate little boys and cut off their penises because mommy tells me that I'm a girl. It's pretty backwards. It's pretty dark if you look at the physical manifestation of this. But if you go back to what I said before and realize that it's a spiritual battle, then it's for each and every one of us to come home to our authority, to our king, and to live in that integrity. And it's only going to get tougher and tougher to live in that integrity as this world continues to degenerate. And so I think it's more important now than ever for men to make a big comeback. And I think one of the first places, I'm starting to rant now because there's so many things I'd love to talk about there, but one of the first places we begin to take our power back is through not giving our power over to the vagina. A big part of the reason why men have lost themselves is because sex has become so flippant with birth control pills and abortions and rampant promiscuity. The vagina now has men by the reins, and so we submit. We do what they want us to do. But the minute we say no, and this is really where I think there's going to be a comeback to celibacy. I really believe it because I see it already with a lot of the men that I mentor. They're like, I give up on women. I'm just not going to deal with them anymore. And the minute men start saying no to women, like there's this movement called MGTOW, men going their own way. When men start saying no to women, we're not going to put up with this any longer, and we're not going to have sex with you any longer. That's when the tables will turn. Right now, they have the control. They have unmitigated control over sexuality and sexual access, but also with children, because now they can kill their babies and they can take birth control pills, all that kind of stuff. But men, if we're going to be the integral part of this, or we're going to be the strong men that we're intended to be, if we're going to turn this boat around, we have to give up this need for sex, for sensuality. It's unnecessary. We don't need it. Quite frankly, and I'm saying these things, and a lot of times they come back and bite me, but we don't need women. Men do not need women. Women need men. Because when shit hits the fan, the first people they get it's the women and children that are weak. So we're going to be invaded, the women are going to all of a sudden look at men like, help us. Men don't need women. because we're the stronger sex, we prize them, we protect them, we provide for them because they represent the future. Only women can have babies, right? Men can't have babies. But as far as survival is concerned, as far as building a civilization is concerned, as far as turning this boat around and doing this thing right is concerned, men can do it without women. Give us one, and have a baby, and that's it. The rest of them can jump in the lake.
Yeah, I understand your point. For a man's survival, he doesn't need a woman,
No.
but to create a family and have a bridge to the future, men and women need each other to co-create the future, right? So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
I have 4 children. You
yeah.
know, I married my high school girlfriend. To hear these things coming from me might sound strange, but I fell in love when I was a teenager, and I married the woman. You know, I've been with one woman my whole life.
That's
I've got
beautiful.
3 daughters.
Beautiful.
And so I see the value of family, like I said before. But for drastic change, you need to take drastic measures. And I can absolutely see the value of men standing up and saying no if we're ever going to turn this thing around.
You said so many interesting things, and I had many thoughts about it. It's like when you talked about virtues, it is like virtues have shifted 180 degrees to what was virtuous once is now unvirtuous, and vice versa. It's like monogamy was virtuous once upon a time, now it's unvirtuous, and polygamy is virtuous. Marriage was virtuous, now it is an oppressive construct by the patriarchy, and it's quite, how can it be a oppressive construct when it basically, one of the main reason I think it was created was to protect the children, right? To protect from mom and dad not separating, and protect from the man just not going around and have every woman pregnant and leaving her. So it is very, it feels very natural to assume that marriage is the optimal solution. Um, and I also like what you were talking about with the authority coming from God. And many people might feel afraid or don't like the word God, but let's call it the highest possible good, the archetypal father of the highest values in the value hierarchy. And if the man then operates himself after those values, then he gets the authority to lead. And if he leads, his woman will feel relaxed, and she can step into her femininity and be the wonderful magic woman that he is. He will create life and a home and everything, and then the child will feel secured and will be spared also from the Oedipus complex if the dad is secure in his masculinity and he leads, and the woman feels relaxed. And there is no, I believe power struggles come up if man and woman are not allowed to be man and woman. Then they will have power struggles and they will torment each other until they divorce. But if they're allowed to be man and woman, they will complement each other so beautifully. It is, yeah, totally beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful when we do it the right way, but we've been manipulated severely. Just look at
Yeah.
Hollywood. It seems like every hero in Hollywood now is a woman.
Yeah, Star
And so
Wars.
they're trying to push it that women are stronger than men. It's the funniest thing to watch these movies where like the women are beating up men all the time now.
Yeah,
But that's backwards. But at the same time, it manipulates little girls into thinking that they need to be tough.
yes.
Well, who needs a tough woman and a weak man?
Yeah.
You have a backwards life in that, backwards family in that regard. And then men are, oh, get in touch with your feminine side and share your feelings and be soft. I was watching like I went with my kids to watch the new Frozen movie, which by the way, I mean, I go because I love my kids, but those things make me throw up. But in the movie, I don't remember the name of the characters, but the main Frozen girl, a good thing, I mean, part of the reason why they call her Frozen because she's ice cold. She's just
Yeah.
she's just like tough.
Mm.
And like the male character, there's some male character who's like, one of the girls falls in love with him. He's like a big tough guy, but he's doing like all these faggy love songs and he's crying and whining about true love and fault. I'm like, what is going on right now? We're teaching boys how to be girls and girls to be boys. And so if the family's not working, there's a really good reason why. And I would just add one more point to why how it's facilitated. It's because the government now becomes the daddy. You don't need a strong father in the house because the woman can leave. You said before that, marriage really protects the woman. Marriage is like you said, because men would be the one to go off. But the tables have been turned because now a woman can leave a man, take half his money, or Uncle Sam in our country, America, the government will just pay for you. Oh, you want to leave your husband? Fine. As long as he doesn't come back, we'll send you a check every month. So government has become our god.
Yeah, and I write about this in my book too, about how the government takes over both the father and the mother role, which enables us to have like a sibling society where we're running around and like siblings who doesn't grow up because it's okay
Yeah.
because we have the government who is the father and the mother, which might be a good thing. Let's say if the man dies and you don't have a family, then oh, good, there is help to get. But I think the problem is most people use it as, let's say, an excuse, or they take advantage of it to not grow up.
Yep.
And I think it makes it um, right now it destroys very much more than it provides.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So once again, men have to say no. We're the ones that got to take back the power. Government's not going to give it back. Women aren't going to give it back, and the
Mm.
government's not going to give it back.
Um, I think it has to start, as you said, with the man,
Yeah.
because let's say man is a gardener, and the and woman is nature. The woman is the soil, and man is the gardener. Uh, the man impregnates a woman with his seed. Is like a man is the gardener,
Hmm.
and let's say the crops of the world have grown sick.
Yeah.
Uh, who is to blame? Is the gardener, obviously, but the problem might be that the gardener doesn't know that he's planting bad seeds, and he just sees the bad crops and he curses and gets angry, but still plants the same
Hmm.
seeds. Uh,
Yeah.
so I think what we are doing is, and what you are doing is, you're spreading knowledge of how to plant. If you want to plant tomatoes, you have to plant tomato seeds and
Yeah.
etc. But also, as you said earlier, with knowledge is useless if it doesn't go into action.
Right.
Also, if you know you're planting the wrong seeds, but you don't do anything about it, it is still as useless as don't know and do.
Yep.
And it's like the female is the soil which we
Hmm.
which we plant our seeds. If we give her seeds of pain, she multiplies that pain. If we give her seeds of love, she multiply
Yeah.
that love. And then it is our responsibility as men to protect and keep order in the garden, to
Yes.
prevent the snakes from coming in like Adam and Eve, and yeah,
That's
and
right. It's
nurture the
Adam's
soul.
fault. A lot of
Yeah,
people want to blame Eve, like, oh,
yeah,
she listened to the snake. But wait a second, Adam was in charge.
yes,
He was given dominion over this. He let the snake in. If he was awake, he would have seen that snake come in and said, "No, get out of here."
yeah. He would have chopped it in two with his sword.
Yeah. So we got to look for those snakes, man. Can't let them in.
Yeah, and they will constantly try to come in. Uh,
Hmm.
I've noticed it's like you might believe when you reach a height that, oh, I have reached such a state of, let's say, consciousness in your spiritual pursuit that now I am safe from snakes.
No, that's when they come in the most.
Yes.
That's when they looking for you.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
like Sisyphus rolling the boulder up on the mountain, and he
Hmm.
believes, oh, it will stay there. And then he turns his back, and then it just rolls all the way down again. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check if I have something that I want to read. We have, I believe, 5 minutes left.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, about marriage then. And this is a concept that I got from you to begin with, and then who I had to research to get to the bottom to, and it makes perfect sense. And we have been talking about it with different words. Uh, Marriage, and this is from the book that I have written. Man is the head, woman is the body.
Hmm.
Together they make a whole. Together they create the holy marriage. Marriage is holy, and it is holy even if you don't believe in God. Wait with me. Even though it is difficult, even though it is difficult defining what believing in God really means, God can be a purely psychological phenomena, like in the definition that God is the highest values in the hierarchies of values. Or he can be a spiritual force that binds everything together. I don't see either excluding each other, and I see both including each other. Even for a hardcore atheist, the concept of God as the highest of values in the value hierarchy is something he might come to accept. Maybe he wishes to call it something else than God. That is totally fine. One might label it the highest possible good. As I mentioned previously in this book, the human being cannot function optimally without values. A man cannot function at all without meaning and responsibility. If the man is the head and the woman is the body in the holy marriage, it builds on the foundation that man leads and woman follows. If man should be put in the position to lead at all, he must also follow. He must follow and submit his masculine power to that of God, or in other words, the highest of values in the hierarchy of values. It is henceforth his responsibility to keep order and to live after the highest of values in the hierarchy of values. He gets his authority from the highest possible good. If the man doesn't step fully in his masculine power, his woman will be unable to relax, and she must sacrifice her femininity, becoming more masculine to compensate for the deficiency of leadership in the relationship. It is a mistreating of the woman by the man if he doesn't step into his masculinity, and their relationship will be tainted by power struggles, resentment, bitterness, and probably, eventually, divorce.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
believe in marriage. I believe it's natural. I believe it's best.
in the progression of God, man, woman,
Hmm.
child.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's not my opinion. It's a fact.
It makes perfect
It,
sense.
yeah, it's a fact. You just look
Yeah,
at the success rate of children that are born to parents that are out of wedlock. They don't thrive nearly as well as children that have two parents. It doesn't take a brain scientist or a theologian to
mm,
figure that out.
yeah. The
We've just been
biggest,
duped.
yeah, and the biggest risk factor for long-term delinquency and antisocial behavior in boys is fatherlessness. So, is the feminist narrative is very crazy in many regards because it contradicts itself.
Yeah.
Saying that men are taught to be toxic masculine by their fathers when their absence is what creates their misery.
every one of these mass shootings that are done by young men here in America, every single one of them are boys from fatherless homes,
Right.
which is toxic. A
Mm.
strong alpha male father who has a firm grip on his family, who doesn't take any bullshit, or an absent, weak father. We see the result. Those that come from a home with a strong alpha male father, even if he exhibits aggressive attitudes, which is beautiful, right? It's aggression that got us here, right? Who's
Yeah.
protecting the boundaries? Who's pushing the boundaries? Who's conquering? Men. So all of a sudden that's toxic. But it's not. It's the weak. It's the absent father that's causing the toxicity, that's causing young men to lose their minds and act out in ways that are violent.
One can say that young men are being hurt if they are not being protected and admired by older men.
Right.
And maybe that older men are also being hurt if they are not sought after for guidance and respected by younger men.
Right. Yeah.
We need the older men to create a bridge to the future.
One of the things that's happened recently is I was watching. I don't know where I learned this, but there was a time when the integration from generations was vertical. There was a vertical integration. Grandfather, a father, and a son would generally wear the same kind of clothes, read the same kind of books, have the same kind of ideas, and it went this way. But now the generations are horizontal, where all the kids of one generation have the same clothes, same ideas, same music, but then the generation above them or below them, the vertical generations, they have there's no sense of continuity.
Mm.
So it's like you said before, it's a sibling society. It's everybody my age, my generation that I seek out and seeks me out as an authority, as opposed to father, grandfather, great grandfather. So instead of it going this way, which makes much more sense because wisdom trickles down that way, you got a bunch of dummies all leading one another at the same generational level. And I heard that the reason why this was done was because it's easier to market to a mass generation that thinks the same way. So if you're going to sell stuff to a generation, get them all wearing the same clothes, thinking the same thing, watching the same stuff, listening to the same music. It's more difficult to manipulate when we've got this trickle down effect from generation to generation. Because one generation will tell the other generation, hey, that's dumb. That's stupid. Don't get
Yeah.
involved with that. My kids, they don't want to hear anything I have to say because Netflix tells them what to think and their friends tell them what to think and social media tells them what to think. So I, even only being, I'm 40, so, I'm not that much older than my kids, but I'm that much more removed from them. So the things that I say seem so archaic. Wow, you're so old with your way of thinking, but I'm not really. We've just been cut off from one another.
Yes. I write about this in my book too, that young people today think they are per uh, automatic superior to the former generation, so they cut them off, and
Right.
by cutting them off, they kill the future, because just like Lowen say, if you cut off the past, the future don't exist, and the natural progression of society, as you say, is supposed to be uh, learning from the elders what they wish they had learned early, so that you can progress and create a better future than what was previously. By
Yep.
integrating the past and learning from it, you have the opportunity to build on the foundation that they already built. For example, reading a book, reading Carl Jung, he laid all his life's work in a book for anyone to pick up, to read, and to understand, and to eventually improve. He left a legacy for anyone to understand, with more time to live, so he can improve it, and he will leave a legacy, and the next person will pick it up, and there should be the natural progression.
Yep.
And I see we are 1 hour and 5 minutes, and I know you said you had 1 hour, so I think we are at the finish line.
Well, that was great. I appreciate you. Thank
I
you for inviting
appreciate
me
you.
onto your show. This was great.
Thank you for coming. Do you wish to say any finishing last words before we go? Maybe the King's transformation program, or where to find your work, or anything?
Well, I mean, you can find me at elliottholse.com. And if you want to find me on social media, I'm usually on Instagram. That's where I will spend the majority of my time. I don't really, I don't make YouTube videos too much anymore. And like I said, I'm trying to do less and be less. So if you really want to find me, you'll find me.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on, Elliot. It was an honor to have you on the podcast.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
You got it, brother.